If you're an atheist, you're likely to see yourself as super intelligent and want to torture and murder folks just for the hell of it. Well, that's according to this guy, David Wood, the atheist turned Christian. He apparently went through some stuff whilst a non-believer, and it almost seems like he blames his lack of belief for being a bit of an idiot. But then, one of the many gods destroyed his atheism and changed everything. Stick around to find out what happened to David Wood. Hello, I'm TheSkepTick, the British floating circle that watches people make extraordinary claims, and then I explain why I don't accept what they're saying. Fortunately, only 1% of the population has psychopathic tendencies, but when those folks blame their behaviour on what they believe, or don't, I guess, I do have to question it. Dr. David Wood, once tried to kill his father, but then apparently one of the gods stopped him from not believing. That god must have given unquestionable proof. Maybe we'll get that in this video. But before we find out what's convincing enough to stop an atheist psychopath from not believing, if this isn't your first Skeptic video, hit the like, the subscribe and the bell to hopefully convert your feed into more of this. And a super thanks to those that hit super thanks in some recent videos. Will Joker, Pavel Nadolski, Ferret Father 2000, New Pitbull 31, Aubrey Leone 4108 and Unfriendly Atheist 616. Lisa the Rainbow Giraffe bestows leaves upon you all. More hen. Okay then, David, destroy my atheism too. It's about time someone did. Oh, right. Start a video off with a Bible quote. I should probably do that too. If a man is caught in the act of raping a young woman who is not engaged, he must pay 50 pieces of silver to her father. Then he must marry the young woman because he violated her, and he will never be allowed to divorce her. Deuteronomy 22:28-29. There. That about sets the tone for this.
Want to go for a ride?
Sure. I like rides.
Imagine an underground world made of concrete and steel, stairways and tunnels. Just enough light to see the signs on the walls. Suppose there were people who lived down here all their lives and were never allowed to visit the surface, and that these people were told from the time they were born that this world is all that exists. Wouldn't they believe what they're told to believe? Wouldn't they try to live like it's true? Suddenly a madman stumbles down the stairs and says to the people living here, "Don't you realize that you're underground? Don't you know that there's an amazing world right up those stairs and that a tomb, no matter how spacious, is still a tomb?" But the people laugh at the man. They say, "We understand our world just fine without all your rambling about another. Go back to your flying spaghetti world, fool. We're the enlightened ones down here." And in rejecting the world above, they sink a little deeper into the world below.
Why would you have to imagine that, though, when you could just go and look outside? If someone demonstrably turns up and says, "I can actually show you this," then they would. I'm not sure what this analogy is even for.
When I was 5 years old, I had a dog named Goliath. One day, my mother received a phone call. She turned to me with tears in her eyes and informed me that Goliath had been run over by a bus. I looked at her and thought to myself, so what, it's just a dog. But my mother was sad, and I couldn't figure out why. I soon noticed that other people got sad when something died. It seemed really weird to me. Crying isn't going to change the fact that it's dead, so why are you crying? I also noticed that people didn't share my amazing insights into the nature of reality. I remember sitting beside a lake when I was 8 years old, watching ants march in perfect formation, and it suddenly became entirely clear to me that ants ruled the world and had only tricked us human beings into thinking that we were in charge.
I feel the same way about cats. Like, they know how to get us to do their bidding, right?
Do you have any idea how powerful and brilliant they must be if they've managed to deceive the entire human population?
You got all that from ants walking in a line, despite the fact we know why they walk in a line, given that the leading ant secretes pheromones that the following ants use their antennae to detect. It's hardly remarkable. Nor does it mean they rule the world.
A few years later, I figured out that pets actually controlled the planet. Whenever a cat or a dog would look me in the eyes, I would think that it was communicating with me, silently bragging that it was much more intelligent than humans were.
I just said that. Uh-oh, does that make me similar to this guy? No, thanks.
So part of my youth was spent talking to animals, telling them, "I know what's going on here. I'm onto you."
And how often did they answer? I'm going to bet never. Which doesn't mean that they actually are the leaders of the world either.
But I grew out of that sort of silliness. By the time I was in 10th grade, I was convinced that I controlled the weather. I didn't know how I controlled the weather, I just knew that I did. It would start raining and I would think, okay, how did I do that? I also had the ability to control time, but I didn't know how to use this ability yet.
I had the ability to fly when I was in 10th grade, but I just didn't know. Also, kids' imaginations are peculiar and spectacular, right?
That summer, my best friend from elementary school died. Jimmy had always talked about going parasailing. He finally got the chance and his harness broke. He plummeted to his death.
I'll take things that didn't happen for 100. Now, okay, I don't actually know that this didn't happen, but a quick search on the interwebs for teenagers that died in parasailing accidents in 1986, 1987 and 1988 came up with nothing. Surely there'd be some record of it. And Jimmy, what kind of a cliche name is that?
When I heard about it after knocking on his door, I had the same reaction I'd had when my dog Goliath died, namely, so what? But this time was different. It seemed like I should be bothered by Jimmy dying, so I started wondering if something might be wrong with me. After pondering this for several months, I realized why I was different. I had evolved to a higher stage of humanity.
By not being upset at things? That sounds like a mental health problem. Not that I'm suggesting you do have mental health problems, Dave, but it definitely doesn't sound like higher evolution.
These sad little emotions the rest of you have, they're like vestigial tales left over from more primitive life forms. But humanity 2.0 had arrived, and you earlier models were now obsolete. The following year, I had a life-changing experience. I was running from the police in the middle of the night, and they had me surrounded on 3 sides.
Well, that's not surrounded then, is it?
The 4th side was the Monongahela River, so I jumped in and swam across and started working my way through the trees on the other side. I eventually emerged from a patch of woods, and I found myself in someone's backyard. In front of me was a beautiful garden.
Yeah, I don't believe this story either. Since he said it was in the middle of the night, how can you tell how beautiful something is without adequate light? I wonder if he's going to end up with, oh, I was an atheist. It certainly seems like it's going that way.
I started to walk around the garden, but then I stopped to philosophize. I thought, I don't care about the people in that house. So why am I going out of my way to avoid stepping on their vegetables? Why am I being so courteous?
Weren't you running from the police? Surely that would be your first thought. Something isn't right here.
Because I've been brainwashed, that's why. I've been breaking the law for years, and yet society had been manipulating my behavior all along. Greatness had been polluted by mediocrity.
Or just take some accountability instead of blaming something else for you being a bit of a twat.
As I stomped my way through that garden, I had an incredible rush of freedom.
Hang on, you just said you didn't stomp their garden.
The world has all of us on a leash made of rules. Do this, don't do that. But it's a leash that slips right off as soon as we recognize that we don't have to do anything anyone tells us to do.
But you're a pretty shitty person if those things hurt yourself and others.
Of course, if you really want to break free from your handlers, seems like you have to do the opposite of what you've been told.
What handlers? This guy really seems to think that there's someone controlling his every move.
Started studying bomb building when I was 18. Nothing fancy yet. I got a copy of the Anarchist Cookbook. I learned to make pipe bombs. I learned to put together a homemade grenade launcher. I bought a book on disguises so I wouldn't be recognized. But it all felt a bit amateurish. So I decided to become a chemistry major in college where I could learn to build something a little more sophisticated. But my plans of becoming a bomber had to be put on hold because there are more important things in life.
So you're adding terrorism into your character building assignment. I'm even more convinced he's going to say he was an atheist now to make out that atheists are just terrible human beings and he was the worst of the worst, and now look at him. Saved. Thank you, Jeebus.
Anyone can blow up a bunch of random people. You don't know them. If you're sick of life dangling at the end of society's puppet strings, the killing has to start much closer to home. My dad was the only relative I had within a few hundred miles, so he obviously needed to die, and I had a ball-peen hammer that would do the trick. Interestingly, some of my amazing insights into the nature of reality actually slowed me down. My dad was sitting beside me on the couch, and I was about to beat him to death. I had the hammer under a cushion. But I suddenly realized that he was reading my mind. And not just him, everyone in the world was reading my mind. I was part of an experiment, and billions of people were in on it.
If you ever feel like this, please go and speak to a healthcare professional.
They were all waiting to see what I would do. And as soon as I attacked my dad, the walls would rise up, the observers would rush in, and the experiment would be over. Since my dad is reading my mind, I'm channeling my thoughts to him as we sit there. He's watching television, and I'm thinking, look at me while you're reading my mind. Look at me right now, I'm going to bust your head open. Finally, I channeled to him, think I'm stupid? I'm not falling for this. And then I got up and walked out. But it wasn't over. After a while, my senses returned to me, and I walked into my dad's bedroom at about 2 o'clock in the morning, Thanksgiving Day. I stood over him with the hammer, and I tried to think of one wrong thing he'd ever done to me. Nothing came to mind. So I drew back my arm and came down on him with all 230 pounds. I didn't know how fast blood could come out of someone's head. Kept hitting him until I was sure he was dead. Then I walked outside and drove away. There was no rush of freedom this time. I didn't feel anything anymore.
Yeah, I'm not entirely convinced this happened either. Though I could be wrong. I've Googled David Wood. Thanksgiving attempted murder. Nothing. I've looked up David Wood from West Virginia, being age 47 as his page says he is, and not one of those 47-year-olds has a criminal record listed. I don't think this really happened. Someone prove me wrong. I'd hate for this to be a made-up story and, look at me, I was saved by Floaty Skyman.
Did I mention that I was an atheist?
There it is. It was only a matter of time. I'm not sure how not being convinced that there's a wizard in the sky led you to make up all those stories, but here we go, we're getting to the point, maybe.
I understand that most of you atheists out there live perfectly normal lives, but I can never understand why you would want to. Think about it. We've got this massive universe, and over here is a tiny little crumb of a galaxy. Out on one of the spiral arms of this galaxy is a thoroughly unremarkable ball of hot gas. Circling this ball of hot gas is a pathetic speck of cosmic dust we call Earth, and crawling all over the Earth are these feeble, selfish, self-destructive lumps of cells constantly deluding themselves into thinking that what they do is so important.
Speak for yourself, I'm quite content doing what I do.
But the universe couldn't conceivably care less whether you love your neighbor as yourself or torture him to death for fun. So you might as well do whatever you feel like doing with the little bit of time you've got.
Oh, thank goodness I have a little bit of empathy, or else I'd be like this whack job.
And what are my atheist friends going to do with your 80 years or so? Let me guess, you're going to go to school for a while, then get a job, work for a few decades, maybe pick up a family along the way, then retire and die of old age or some illness. How original.
Why does it have to be any different? You could attempt to murder your relatives and then spend your time in a little box until you finally expire. Where's the fun in that?
Free thinkers, huh? Believe it or not, some people don't want to live like cattle. Some people don't want to follow this pattern that we're all expected to mindlessly follow.
And some people want to blindly offer their love and money to an undemonstrated being that they think will give them a prize for doing so. If that's the case, I'd rather be cattle than a sheep.
Some would rather bash a man's head in, or shoot up a theater, or walk down their school hallway, stabbing people. And why shouldn't they? Because it's wrong? Says who, your grandma?
No, says the law. The man-made law. The one that has basic human empathy at its core. No God needed. And isn't it religious folks that end up doing those things anyway? Why would someone go on a killing spree in the name of atheism? It's not like anyone wants to prove who doesn't believe more.
Or should they try not to hurt people because people have intrinsic value? Here I thought that human beings are nothing but machines for propagating DNA.
Oh man, someone wants to straw man hard.
Most people don't want to kill and slaughter, but for those who do, our civilization is rapidly destroying any significant reason they might have for resisting the urge to kill and slaughter. Young people are lining up to dance to the music of their DNA. All you can do now is hope that they get tackled when they stop to reload, or that they make some huge blunder when their bloodbath begins. I made a huge blunder when my bloodbath began. I underestimated the amount of damage a human head could endure. Crushed skulls can apparently be pieced back together by doctors. My dad had brain damage, but he survived the attack. I was taken to a mental hospital and later to jail. Jail is a place to sit back and reflect on the things you've done. You've got plenty of time to sit back and think, why did I get caught?
I searched even harder on the Googles to see if this guy really did go to jail, and all I can find is religious websites retelling his amazing conversion story. That doesn't mean all this happened. Someone, please.
What steps can I take to avoid getting caught next time? And without all of the empty, repetitive tasks that ordinarily keep you mentally sedated, you've got plenty of time to figure out what's most important to you. The most important thing to me was not being a slave to people for whom I had nothing but contempt. But people had controlled me in various ways throughout my life, and this meant that they would need to be taught a lesson. I had a list of people going back to kindergarten who were going to be brutally murdered, but doubts occasionally crept in.
Like my doubt that this story is even real.
I would ask myself, is there a point to any of this?
I'm asking myself that very same question.
Nothing really matters, so what difference does it make whether I do everything I've been planning or I do nothing at all? There's no blue ribbon for making the right decision here because there is no right. But when I would start to think that life off the leash was just as meaningless as life on the leash, I'd start to lose my mind. I was able to hold things together to some extent, mentally, because I had something to do. But if what I had to do was pointless, then holding things together was pointless. So I was at an edge, and there's nowhere to go but over it. But life has a way of giving us an alternative at just the right moment. When I was in E-Block in the jail, I met a Christian named Randy, a guy who had turned himself in for 21 felonies. Randy seemed like he was from another world. There'd be a fight in the dorm and he wouldn't watch. He'd turn his head away and pray for it to stop. Our main source of entertainment, and he's praying against it. Christians crack me up. Randy was lying on his bunk reading his Bible one night, and I walked up to him and said, do you know why you're reading the Bible? You're reading the Bible because you were born in the United States. If you've been born anywhere else, you believe in something else. If you've been born in China, you'd be a Buddhist. If you've been born in India, you'd be a Hindu. If you've been born in Saudi Arabia, you'd be a Muslim because people like you believe whatever you're told to believe. I've since heard other atheists say the same thing in almost exactly the same words. So I take it that this is a common atheist view of Christians, which is hilarious in its level of hypocrisy. I believe that the universe exploded out of nowhere for no reason, and that life formed on its own, and that consciousness was a natural product of particle interactions in our brains, and that moral values were nothing but societal indoctrination, and that Jesus' followers made up a story about him rising from the dead because they wanted his message to spread. I believed all of this without anything remotely resembling a careful investigation of the evidence, which means I believed a lot of what I'd been told. But I'm pointing a finger at the Christian.
Hang on. Aren't you now a Christian in the USA? I'm failing to see the point now.
Why? Because it's much easier to make fun of someone else than to do the difficult work of putting together a coherent, well-grounded belief set.
I can make a coherent belief set in that Lisa the Rainbow Giraffe, leaf be upon her, is the most logical of all gods since she ate all the other gods before pooping out the universe. But then belief isn't quite as good as evidence now, is it?
Something interesting happened when I made fun of Randy. He fought back. Lots of Christians will go into retreat mode if you start arguing with them. They don't want to cause a scene.
No, they absolutely do not. So this story's fake too. How many folks have been told by a Christian that they're stupid, dumb, or wrong, or whatever for not believing in the God of the Bible? I bet there are tons of comments on this video about that.
But Randy sat up on his bunk and proceeded to embarrass me about some of the things I was saying. I was totally shocked.
So he apparently belittled you, but didn't show you undeniable proof for you to then pass on and prove the God. Interesting.
I didn't know what was going on. I'm the smartest, most advanced human being the world has ever seen. And night after night, when we were arguing, Randy was just taking me to a school.
Well, maybe you weren't as clever as you thought you were.
And he wasn't smarter than me. He didn't have any special knowledge or degrees. He wasn't a scientist or a philosopher. He just had an annoying habit of questioning everything I would say. And when I would try to answer his questions about what I was saying, it would become clear to him and to me that many of my beliefs, when put into words, sounded really, really stupid. Things that made perfect sense when unquestioned made no sense at all when questioned.
Like what? Don't just say the words and not give examples.
I became so frustrated by our arguments that I began looking for other ways to defeat Randy. I made fun of him for getting molested when he was a child. I saw his 12-year-old sister in the visiting room, and I said some things about her that I'm not going to repeat here. I'd keep messing with him until he got upset. And when he got upset, I'd say, look at you, getting angry at me. You call yourself a Christian? Oddly enough, Randy and I became friends. We'd stay up all night playing cards, throwing a roll of toilet paper around like it's a football, and of course, arguing about the Bible.
The more this goes on, the more it makes him sound like a real POS. So are we going to get to a point where he says, I'm a good person now because of a God? Honey, that doesn't make you a good person. If the only reason you're doing good things is because you think a magic man in the sky will punish you for doing otherwise, then you're still a person. But he then goes on about a fasting story that happened in prison. I'm not sure it's real, really.
I had a perfect opportunity to prepare for an epic showdown with Randy. I could study the Bible, put together new arguments, go back to E-Block, and destroy the faith of my friend. I asked the chaplain for some Bible studies. He gave me a series of studies on the Gospel of John with graded assignments. So here I am, a rapidly deteriorating atheist, sitting in a poorly lit cell, doing my Bible homework, getting straight A's. I haven't eaten in days, and I read about Jesus saying, "I'm the bread of life. He who comes to me will never go hungry." I'm obsessed with liberating myself from a society that has me trapped in a 6.5 by 8 foot cell. And I read, "The Son sets you free, you will be free indeed." I'm wondering how long my body can take what I'm doing to it before my heart stops. And I read, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live, even though he dies." Kind of creepy when a book talks to you, but what do I know? I used to think that cats were talking to me.
Yeah, that's nothing to do with atheism though, buddy. And being stressed and starved of light, air and nutrients can really affect your brain.
Lying on my back, day after day, reflecting on life and theology and philosophy, 3 things started to destabilize my entire belief system. First, what's called the design argument finally hit me. I was looking at a wall and how the bricks were arranged, and I thought to myself, you know, if someone told me that these bricks went into this order by some process that didn't involve intelligence, I'd smack them in the mouth. And yet I believe that life formed without intelligence when the most basic living cell is unimaginably more complicated than some bricks stacked on a wall.
The argument from design. I wasn't expecting that lame explanation that has been refuted hundreds of times to be what convinced him. If life has intelligent design behind it, then all of it should be intelligent. There is so much that isn't. Maybe you should go through some old videos to see about that.
Why did I blindly accept the extraordinary claim that life arose spontaneously from non-life without demanding some very good evidence?
But there is evidence. Why do you now just accept the claim that there's a God when there's no evidence of that? It seems you've just gone, I don't understand why X, so a God must be the cause.
Second, I found out how Jesus' apostles died. Most of them went to their bloody deaths claiming that they had seen him risen from the dead. My explanation for the origin of Christianity had always been that the apostles made up a story so that they could spread his message. But now my explanation wasn't making sense. If you're willing to die for something, you have to believe it.
People have been willing to die for things for centuries. That doesn't make the thing they believe in true. It just means they're convinced of a thing.
When a terrorist blows himself up, he's obviously sincere. So the disciples, the apostles, had to believe what they were dying for, but this means that they were convinced that they had seen Jesus risen from the dead. Now, usually when someone is willing to lay down their life for something, it's for an ideology that they got from someone else, and that ideology could be true or false. The disciples were dying for something that they saw. What could have convinced so many different people that they had all seen a resurrected man?
Hang on, though. It's just written that the disciples saw a resurrected Jesus. Outside of the Gospels, which make the claim that this thing happened, there's nothing to demonstrate that this thing actually happened. So
I could explain one witness by saying he's crazy, but all of them? Something was going on here and I had to figure it out, but I couldn't come up with any explanation for why they had that level of confidence other than they actually saw him.
Here's an explanation. It's completely made up.
Third, I started worrying that Jesus might actually be better than me. Now, if you're not a complete moral relativist or maybe one of the new atheists, it's probably obvious to you that Jesus is better than me. But I wasn't the clearest thinker on moral issues back then, so getting my mind around this was very difficult. Here's the problem that emerged. I had two beliefs that just didn't go together. On the one hand, I believe that human beings are lumps of cells, meaningless lumps of cells, and that everything we did was pointless. At the same time, I believed that I was the best, most important person in the entire world. How is it possible to be the best, most important, worthless lump of cells?
That's just how you describe yourself. Do I think anything on Earth is a worthless clump of cells? No. But do I think those living things were created? Also no. I see a beautiful, though slightly in trouble planet where creatures somewhat unknowingly help to keep the planet habitable. Okay, maybe not humans, but the rest of them are okay. Mostly.
If there were to be some sort of best person, that would require something like, a standard of good. And that would require something like God, and then someone like Jesus would be better than me. So my beliefs were breaking down at the foundational level. And once the foundations start crumbling, everything starts coming down. I went from believing that I was the best person in the world to thinking that I was the worst person in the world. And in a moment of clarity, it all just hit me, thinking, I'm a guy who once choked my friend until bloody foam came out of his mouth. I hit him with a shovel.
Some friend? Though this could probably go in the pile of stories of things that never happened.
Because he disagreed with me. I don't even remember what it was about. I used to watch my mom's boyfriend beat her, and I wouldn't lift a finger to help her. Not because I was scared. I was 200 pounds and I had a gun. I could have stopped it at any time. I just didn't care.
Yep, calling BS on that too.
And I was proud of the fact that I didn't care. Thought about what I'd done to my family, what I was doing to myself. They brought me food every single day, and I was starving to death because I wouldn't eat it. There were other starving people in the world, but at least they could think straight. I sat there thinking about torturing people. My skin was turning yellow. I was scratching myself bloody. What sense did it make to think that I'm the best at anything?
When's God going to destroy your atheism, though?
When I was thinking about that situation, I just thought, it feels like I've just been stomped relentlessly into the ground. And when I thought that, I started comparing it with a little hospital stay about a year and a half earlier. I got into a fight with 7 guys. I'm not saying that to be tough. They won that one. I got one of them. He hit me with a gun, and I hit him with these guns. And then his 6 friends got on me and got me on the ground and then took turns soccer kicking me in the head.
He's got an awfully symmetrical head for someone that was soccer kicked by 6 guys.
But I was comparing that to the situation I was in. I was thinking, I was okay the next day. I had scratches on my neck. I was dizzy walking around. I had my arm in a sling, but I was okay.
The natural remedy for being kicked in the head is a sling.
Fighting 7 guys is a joke compared to what I was going through in that cell. I feel like I've just been stomped into the ground. And when I thought that I felt like I'd been stomped into the ground, I had another flashback. One night I was walking home from a friend's house and a storm hit. There was rain was so bad I could barely see. Lightning was striking all over the place. And I looked up and mockingly said, is that supposed to scare me? If you want me to believe in you, better come down here and make me believe.
Spoken like a true atheist.
I wasn't serious, but given my circumstances in the jail, I had to start wondering if God had taken it seriously. That normally wouldn't have been an option. I didn't think like that. But since my entire worldview was crumbling, I wasn't in a position to dismiss alternatives.
Yep, I'm going to say that didn't happen either, since he'd apparently found God in jail. And so this timeline seems a bit jumpy, almost like it's being made up.
But there's a problem. If there was a God involved in all of this, if right and wrong weren't merely useful fictions, I was in all kinds of trouble. Not just for what I had done, but for what I was. How is the worst person in the world going to ever do the right thing? There's no magic switch that I can flip and, now I care about other people. So how was I going to do anything right? And then it hit me.
Like 6 guys soccer kicking you in the head.
That there are 2 possibilities. Either I'm violent and selfish and uncaring, and that's just the way things are, or there's someone who can help people like me.
Surely the options would have been either you're a violent, uncaring blah, 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 or someone made you that way.
Either I'm all messed up and that I just had to live with that, or there was someone who could deal with this sort of thing. And when you start thinking like that, I'd say you're about 2 inches away from becoming a Christian, because when we ask ourselves, who, out of anyone, ever, who had the ability to take psychologically, spiritually, and morally shattered people and give them new life, you get a list of 1.
Actually, you have a list of about 4,000. But if you're going down that route, surely you'd have to question why that being, which you said is the reason for the design, made you that way in the first place.
There's one person on the list. He's the one who said, I am the door. If anyone enters through me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. I didn't know if Jesus was who he claimed to be, but I knew that it was Jesus or nothing. It was Jesus or nothing. If anyone has God's stamp of approval, it's the guy who rose from the dead.
So it has its own stamp of approval for doing something it apparently made itself do, and there really is no proof that J to the Izzy actually did rise from the dead.
History is filled with dead options. Jesus is the last living option.
That is actually dead.
So I bowed down on my bunk, not sure of much of anything, and I prayed. I didn't know how to pray, but I prayed. And I said, God, I don't know if I'm going to believe in you tomorrow, but I believe in you right now. If you can do anything with me, you're welcome to it. And then I continued with a kind of sinner's prayer that I had read in those Bible studies.
So you did know how to pray since you got all A's in your Bible studies class, FFS. Your story has more holes in than some of my pairs of socks.
And when I sat up from that prayer, the entire world looked different. Like everything was a different color. For the first time in a lot of years, I didn't want to hurt anyone. And I had a strange sense that I'd somehow known the truth all along. God created the universe, but we're something special. We're created in God's image.
Oh, now it makes sense. That's why you went on killing hurt sprees. Because that's all that God likes to do. Finally, some truth. That'll do, Skeptic. That'll do. There's only so much made-up nonsense you can take. And not once did he explain why or how a God destroyed his atheism. So here I am, a continuing non-believer just waiting for some kind of demonstrable proof that there is a God out there. Do you think these stories actually happened? Do you think that he now has valid reasons to believe? Let me know in the section below. I'm going to SkepTick this as more made-up silliness. A big thank you to this month's top-level ticks on Patreon. Godless Granny, Addy Rockart, The Enixes, Jakari, Elizabeth, Whiskey Tech Fred, Rick and Travis, as well as all the $3 base ticks. You can become a supporter on Patreon too at patreon.com/TheSkepTick. The link is in the description, along with links to all my other socials. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. From me, the TheSkepTick, stay safe, keep thinking logically, and ask questions. Skepticism is the first step towards truth. See you next Saturday.